Hey y'all, so you can tell by the title of the video, this is my story. How I started in the amplifier arena, why I kind of had to, and how Ehlers Danlos has affected my life, but also in a way kind of shaped it in a way that I am who I am today, both good and bad. So Ehlers Danlos, just on a high level, is a genetic disorder. It deals with the connective tissue of your body, specifically collagen. So a lot of people get dislocations, subluxations, gastrointestinal issues. There's 13 different categories of Ehlers-Danlos. Me specifically, I'm on the hypermobile, but also I have some classical Ehlers-Danlos syndrome symptoms or issues as well. Sorry. And when I was younger, didn't really affect me. I was told I was double jointed. Doing stretches in PE class. I was able to go way further in the stretches than most of the other kids did, and the coaches and teachers back then were just like, "Oh, well, you're just double jointed," and just moved on. As you kind of get older, you kind of think about it, like, no real such thing as double jointed. Hyperflexible, sure. And even when I was, playing in bands and such, back right out of high school, I would do crazy things like, flip my arm around my head and play weird on the bass guitar. Yes, I was a bass player. Go ahead and make all the fun jokes you want to now. But my day job at the time was a mechanic. Earned a certification in diesel mechanics, started going off in that field. And one thing that kind of happened on the journey was I started having real bad knee and ankle problems. Being in that field really is tough on your body. And kind of didn't think too much of it, kind of thought, like, hey, it's just rough on my body. It is what it is. Then I kind of moved on to the automotive field and still had to wear like knee and ankle braces just to kind of get around. But then I kind of started noticing, like taking a tire off of a car, my shoulder would separate. Not like fully dislocate, but it would just kind of pop out a little bit and get locked up, and I would just kind of have to work it to get it back in. And it did get to the point to where it was becoming very painful to move on to that field. Now, luckily, the employer I had at the time, when I told them, like, I don't think I can do this anymore as far as a mechanic, they found me other work, office work. So I was able to do that for a while, still doing the music stuff from time to time, going out to blues jams. I wasn't playing in a band at that time. Had different jam sessions that I would go to, but was starting to where I couldn't play as much as I used to, just because my fingers didn't want to work, and it was just they didn't want to be stable. I couldn't put the pressure down and have the stability to hold like chord shapes for very long. I used to be able to do 2-3 hour full shows. Then it got down to where it's like, okay, an hour. Then a 30-minute session was about it. And it eventually got to the point to where it's just like I can barely make it through one song. So that's kind of when I started seeking treatment, because I was at the time thinking that, you know, this is more than just normal aches and pains that, you know, 20-something-year-old should be having at this time. And I saw a lot of doctors, rheumatologists, general practitioners, and such, and no one could really have any answers for me. So I kind of took matters in my own hands and started doing my own research. And that's where I came across Ehlers Danlos, because this was years ago. It was in the 2000s, in the mid-teens, but it still wasn't commonly known. And one thing I will say is just the amazing outreach of people commenting the Rhett Scholl video has shown that it's become more common knowledge than it was when I got diagnosed. But I had to be the one to go to my general practitioner and show her the information and say, hey, this is something I think we should look into, at least not rule out. Now, lucky for me, there's a research hospital about 90 minutes away from where I live, and they had a genetics department that had a specialization in Ehlers Danlos, and went there, did the tests, and they got some family history. And one thing, my great-great-grandfather, he was in braces, like knee and ankle braces, when he was a teenager, and by the time he was in his 30s, he was in a wheelchair just because he couldn't walk because of pain. That was kind of a clue as well, as the diagnosis. So I got diagnosed with Ehlers Danlos, but, you know, it was okay, well, great, you got the diagnosis, what do you do? There's no treatments for it. There's supportive care, there's different diets you can try, but there's no cure. You know, there's no magic pill they can give you. So I had a diagnosis and had the, you know, the knowledge of here's some things to try, and tried a lot of them, and it's trying to get, you know, help in the right areas, because a lot of people, a lot of medical professionals that I went to, you know, didn't know about it. I had one that I went to one time that said, hey, sorry it took so long. I was reading about this when I saw it on your chart, you coming in, I've never heard of it before. And that one particularly said, you know, she kind of remembered, you know, a blurb about it in a textbook, but I had to read up on it. I've, you know, done physical therapy for it. Sometimes it helps, sometimes not really. But one thing that started happening was walking became very difficult for me, to the point to where it was so painful to where I was using a wheelchair to get around. And if you look in the video on the Driftwood channel, I'll see if I can grab a screenshot of it. When I'm giving them the amplifier, you can see the wheelchair in the back of the vehicle that I have. And there was a real low point to where my general practitioner said, enough is enough. You're taking medical leave to basically sit home, do nothing but go to physical therapy. And just as the mindset that I kind of have, you know, I pride myself in work. You know, it may or may not be a good physical or psychological state to have, but my work kind of defines who I am. And if I'm unable to do work, it was really a dark time of, you know, thinking a lot of my life was over. But that's kind of when two things started happening. That's right around when, one, artificial intelligence was kind of catching on. And when I kind of also had another friend of mine kind of start teaching me more about tube amplifiers and like tube circuitry, really. And I had a few tube amplifiers, had an old Vox AC4, and then ended up with a Blues Junior. Before that, I actually used Line 6 HD500s. Yeah, the tube amp builder here used to use modelers. The right tool for the right job, I guess. But I had the realization of, looking at people like Stephen Hawking as an example. He couldn't be a mechanic. He couldn't be a mechanic, but he was able to still do so much because of his mind. And a lot of people, told me how intelligent I am and such, and I, one, don't believe it, but being able to keep my mind going and seeing, hey, computer programming and such, that's something I can do. If my body's failing me to where I don't have to walk anymore, type on a keyboard, or there's dictation software you can use. And then with the music stuff, hey, you can work on amplifiers. I'm not toting a twin reverb around. That's not gonna happen. That Marshall, I can barely move that sucker around today. But the idea of, yes, you can't be the musician anymore. You can't be the artist. But you can allow those artists to create through other creations of my own. Because I started learning, how circuitry works. The Blues Junior, I ordered all of the stuff that Bill M at the time had, and modified it. But one thing I kind of paid attention to was, why does this part change the sound in a way? Instead of just going through and shotgunning every single component that he had, I would swap one out and listen to it, see how it changed the sound, swap another one out, see how it affected the sound. Started learning that. And then, my friend who kind of taught me about like tube amplifiers, tube circuitry, specifically, like he's more on the ham radio side, going to him and double checking it and just saying like, yeah, I'm hearing this, does that kind of make sense? Yes. Okay, so I'm starting to understand how it works. And with the musical background, I could understand like, hey, it's too flubby in the low end. Okay, well, now I know what parts to change to tighten that up. Or it's too bright, I know what parts to change to adjust for that. Or I want more gain or distortion, whatever. And so I started learning that by reading research, not relying upon my physical body, but relying upon my mind to learn how to do these things. And there's a lot of great resources out there. I'm hoping I'm becoming one of these. But Uncle Doug was one that kind of helped me get more into the guitar amplifiers. Physonic Lyle, he was one of the early inspirations as well. But that's how I got into the amplifiers. And the first scratch built amplifier I ever built was for a local guy around here. He was using a 3 amp setup. And I met him at a gig, one of these jam sessions. And I saw him, he had 2 old Silvertone amplifiers and some sort of deluxe reverb copy. And he invited me over, and he had some other of his friends that built amplifiers. for him. And I had the idea, just through the knowledge I had accumulated, to be able to go, I think I could take your entire guitar rig and put it into one box. And one of the other guys who was there, who's been in Premier Guitar Magazine, I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but he's been in Premier Guitar Magazine. He's had amplifiers sold in Nashville and such. Looked at me and said, "You can't do that. It will never work." Well, that amplifier is still working to this day, and that was almost 15 years ago. So, kind of a lesson learned there. Don't let anyone tell you you can't do something that you know you can. So that was a big jumping off point for me. Designing an amplifier completely from scratch. I did take some inspiration from that Blues Junior, because that's kind of an amplifier that I knew. I needed a power supply, basically. So I was like, we'll just use the power transformer out of the Blues Junior and then go from there. And then that's kind of when I started learning about Dumble amplifiers, train wreck amplifiers, built several clones of Dumbles, pretty much every single circuit that's out there has been documented. The train wreck, you all have heard that amplifier. Just to kind of learn firsthand. I'm very tactile when it comes to things. To learn what they were going for and how they got there. And again, this is all learning. This is not necessarily 100% having to do things. You do have to, for me, soldering and stuff takes time. I've got to take breaks. I've got to rest, because I've started listening to my body more instead of trying to push myself beyond the limit. And so, I can solder a few resistors, take a break. I don't have to do, hour-long sessions with these, building these things. I can take my time. That's kind of one of the reasons why I like, building the amplifiers at the kind of the level that I am now. Just, it's enough to kind of keep me entertained, but not to where I'm putting my body underneath a huge stress. That's kind of one thing that I've had to learn is, and apply this to amplifiers as much of anything, that if you're looking for one thing to solve a lot of issues, it's very difficult to find it. But if you can find one thing to make 1% improvement, you only have to do that 100% or 100 times, and then you're at 100% improvement. And we can learn so much today. The internet is out there. Instead of using the internet for just, doom scrolling, is what a lot of people would call it today. I chose to, learn a subject. Not only the guitar amplifier stuff, but I went back and completed college education in computer science. I've even been published in my work for artificial intelligence. I know that can be a polarizing subject, but was able to accomplish so much when at one time I thought it's all over. So yes, Ehlers Danlos has caused issues for me, but at the same time, I wouldn't be who I am today without it. I wouldn't have met my wife. We've been married for almost 16 years now. I wouldn't be the person who I am today without it. And honestly, I don't think I'd change anything.